Welcome to Show Studio. It's our first roundup panel of the day, and we're going to be talking about Milan Fashion Week. Whenever I do that, I'm always worried I've just picked the wrong season, and everyone's going to look at me and be like, what are you talking about? We're not talking about that. It's an interesting one for Milan, because I think whenever we do these roundups, people are, they kind of think of Milan a bit like a one-show city, that everyone goes, they're excited about Prada, and the rest is kind of, you go if you have commitments or relationships with the brand. But I think that's totally changed. There was a lot of excitement, obviously, because of what's happening at Gucci. I think that's made everyone really intrigued by Milan. But also I think there was quite a big season just in terms of people moving around. We had a few new appointments, new designers. So I think it was a new spotlight on the city, which was quite interesting. Before we kind of dive in and talk about our highlights and potentially lowlights, I'll let you guys just introduce yourselves, starting with you, Julia.
Shall I start? I'm Julia Hobbs. I work in the fashion features team at British Vogue.
I'm Andrew Davis. I'm creative director of Wonderland magazine.
And I'm Jo Ellison, and I'm the fashion editor of the Financial Times.
That was good. Everyone's cheerful. Usually everyone goes really serious when they introduce themselves, and it's really cringe.
But it's a focus mode.
Crime watch.
So I'm going to kind of throw it open, because usually I always start, as I say, I always start talking about Milan by asking everyone what they thought of Prada, but maybe it's worth talking about if there were any kind of highlights or surprises that really struck people, that people thought were really strong. Anyone?
Yes. I think the changing face of Milan beauty, because I think people have got very used to seeing Milan as the season where you see the girls with the sort of mega volume hair, the cat's eye, cat's eye makeup. It was this sort of Versace stereotype of beauty, and now Versace totally changed that up. Labels like Etro, where it's classically been about the very, the glamazon girls, the tans, the perfect makeup, the hair, and sort of one type of beauty. And this season, obviously, with Ruth Bell with her shaved head, but there were lots of shows where it just seems to be a much broader take on.
And do you think that's because of? Do you think that pace has been set in some ways by what's happened at Gucci, or do you think it's more that Milan feels like it has to sort of move forward based on what's going on in other cities and elsewhere?
Both. I think it reached saturation point. I think there's also, just generally socially and also within our own industry, there's a different idea of grooming now.
Yeah. When you say beauty, though, do you mean diversity, or do you mean just literally the way people cut their hair?
Yeah.
Because I felt as though there was a greater sense of diversity, although it's like clearly kind of not even slightly where it should be.
Yeah.
There seemed to be, things like Bottega, there was kind of a really good representation of both body shapes and sort of like ethnic diversity.
Yeah.
And then the same was true of lots of the other shows. There were lots of shaved heads, there were lots of afros. It was that felt as though, but I think that was consistent throughout all of the cities.
Yeah.
But I think Milan probably is just nice. It's just refreshing to see things.
It really felt like it leaped forward this season.
Yeah.
In terms of diversity and body shapes, it was much more. I think we're losing the sort of seasons where you have one type of girl, like a model girl that becomes the Versace girl, the Gucci girl. It's much more of this mixed up.
And do you think that sense of sort of diversity and a slightly more eclectic feel, is that reflected in the clothes themselves as well? Because I felt that some of the collections are much more kind of like something for everyone. Feels much more about Prada, Gucci. They're very cluttered collections.
Definitely Gucci. Definitely, I think it was much more about kind of piling it on, and that sort of sense of pick and mix, so that you could look at a look. You could see, there was some looks that would be she'd be wearing 20 rings, she'd have a lace glove, she'd have 3 bracelets, there'd be like 4 brooches.
And a tie.
There was so much going on in the looks that there was a kind of either an accessibility for everybody so that they could find, there's something for everyone.
Yeah.
I think less so actually at places like Prada. It was cluttered, but it was still very much conforming to a look that was consistent with what was going on with the Prada show. Whereas I think Gucci's got a much more sort of jumble sale appeal.
So producty. It's interesting. I was thinking a lot about Gucci just in terms of thinking about the Saint Laurent model and how well they've done at kind of growing all their categories, making sure that it's not like the bags are leading the way or the footwear is leading the way. It's very much like all all the categories, and it feels like that's what's so smart here, like all that like stuff, you know, the little rings and the berets. Like I was looking at the little berets and they've like sold out everywhere. It's completely mad.
And also the brooches apparently from the autumn winter collection just flew out the door. But also it's something you can just do. It's an instant little kind of pick me up. So you can get into the label at a very, it's all about merchandising, isn't it? I mean, they've like really worked out how to sell things, and the fact that they'd like revamp the store at the same time, so there were like people in and out, and there was a lot of buzz. It just felt, I felt Milan just felt buzzy, and I don't think it's felt buzzy for about at least 7 years. It felt exciting to sort of see the kind of rise of Gucci. Prada, it was like the old days, you know, it was like Tom Ford versus Prada, you know, it was like, you know, two titans going it with slightly different aesthetic and different ideas about how women should be dressing. And it was really divisive, you know, people liked and hated, which I thought was, that's great around a season when you've got like a lot of opinion.
Gucci does give you a lot of talking points, because there is just so much stuff. There is so much stuff going on.
I haven't met anyone who hates it though. Everyone
I
seems
met
to
lots of people who didn't like it.
Do you like it? You're staying very quiet.
I do like it. I was watching the screen. I do like it.
He's the one paying attention.
I know, he's just catching up.
I think everything is just...
French people don't like it.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Sorry, I'm totally interrupting you though. Like, go on.
I do feel like that everything's so overloaded though. It's like, it's just like, it's really hard to break down, I feel like. Even for me as a stylist, it's like looking for, you know, a great dress for somebody or a great suit. It's like, so, you really have to root for it now. It's like, for God's sake, there's that and that and that.
Unpick it.
He described it as what he does. We talked about this. We did a panel discussion about Gucci, and he talks about what he does as like fake vintage, which I thought was like really, really interesting, given a lot of the flack that goes to some other designers, so people like Ellison is that it's just copying vintage pieces, and I thought it was really interesting that he kind of acknowledged that and kind of
but he doesn't, because he hadn't used like all of those bags that look like 70s bags. They're not reproductions from the archive, which I had imagined that presumably he had done, and none of the prints are things that exist already.
So he's reimagining.
Yes, vintage. It's like things really that look like things that might have existed in an old Gucci that didn't, and which is brilliant when you're an incoming designer to a brand, because you're creating a kind of fake DNA as well.
So it's like, it's layer upon layer of trompe l'oeil. It really is. It's like you saw so much actual trompe l'oeil in this collection, like the kind of, you know, the flattened bows, etc., etc. But actually, it's like, it's the effect of a fake vintage catalogue. You know, it's this sort of very clever deception. With Gucci though, which I think will be interesting to see in the editorial that comes out of it, is whether it's adhering to the full look. I think like with Gucci, it's one of those things where I would be personally excited to see it broken up and styled in a wearable way.
In really different ways.
Yeah,
they won't allow that though.
I think have they already sort of established? I think they're quite open. He's very laissez-faire about like, do what you want with it.
Yeah, that's what I think you want to see.
But when you shoot it, there's a lot missing. You never get 10 rings. You're lucky if you get a ring. I don't know where the rings are. They're on an exhibition shoot.
I think he's actually interestingly not about a kind of full look. I think he's about people going and interpreting it for themselves.
Good.
So what I was saying before is like, I think, you know, everyone's, you know, I was talking to him after the show and he said, you know, London and Britain has totally taken it on because they love the eccentricity, they love that geek girl, they love the kind of idea of glasses and sequins and a sort of difficult frumpy loafer with fur falling off it and a bit of a sequin. But actually other markets, like the Italian market, I think at first was really like, what the hell's this? And in France, I think there's still, I mean, I spoke to so many kind of French journalists and kind of PRs who were like, you know, they just didn't understand it. They just don't think it's chic, which I think is really interesting.
I think it's because for so long you've equated chic with minimal, you know, with kind of reserved and refined and edited, and this is just completely the opposite of that. And
also it's like willfully not. I mean, you can't put a woolly hat on someone with a pom-pom on it and go, that's so chic. in a way, like, you know, in such a sort of easily interpreted way.
But I think in general it's like this kind of defiance. There is something about Milan which now carries. It's like what you said about the excitement of the season. It has this sense of defiance.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not going to be doing versions of Celine's minimalism from 4 years ago. You know, it's it's not doing that. It's kind of very much striking out with this very energetic, very sort of, I don't know, renegade.
I think one thing I found really interesting about, I mean, to keep on banging on about Gucci, but I think it's like it's the third designer who sort of arrived at a house and sort of established a very strong aesthetic with the first collection that he subsequently followed through with like almost identical collections.
Yeah,
I mean, there was not a lot to sort of differentiate the first and second, and I think some people that was a little bit disappointing. But I think there's this growing change in the industry that a designer isn't supposed to bring a new proposition to the table each season.
Yes.
It's all about building this wardrobe and creating this consistency of vision, which you're seeing with Nicolas Ghesquière at Vuitton and Hedi. You know, people can, every time they can criticize these people for like doing the same thing and like just tweaking things. And I think that the market is increasingly becoming focused on that sort of designer ideal, but I'd be really interested to see where Gucci is in like 3 seasons, like what he's doing and where he's going to go. Because
do you think people need to go somewhere though? I was thinking about that because of, as you were saying, that kind of sense of going into a house, revolutionising it, and then just sticking with what you've.
I think a few seasons.
I think that increasingly not. I think actually where the money is at the moment is about consistent merchandising. It's pretty kind of depressing possibly because creatively it's not the most exciting kind of direction. But I think in terms of the way the market is going and the delivery systems and the fact that pre-fall kind of, the pre-collection has to sort of maybe speak to whatever else is going on. I think the kind of models of delivery mean that we're going to be seeing houses becoming a very defined thing.
If stuff's dripping into store, you almost don't want that much change. If you've got new product coming in the whole time, you want it, as you say, to completely sit with what's already there and
build your own. Like for the woman, you want, and they want loyalty. They want customers who start with a shoe and then they buy the handbag and then they buy the coat and then they. So they're going to keep coming back. And I think where people.
What's going on? Is it a drill? It's terrifying.
But also, it is very expensive. It's very expensive, so I think they have to be, brands are perhaps growing increasingly realistic that their shoppers are acquiring it in a more piecemeal way. They perhaps don't buy into the full look, they buy sort of their own collectibles.
It is very expensive, but it isn't at the same time in terms of, with Gucci, like the rings are like, you can get ones for like, 180, 300 pounds.
But it's tiered, isn't it?
It's what really
you buy
clever.
into, whether you're buying the full.
Well, the belt's 270 quid,
Yeah.
and the fur loafer was about 1,200. It's quite genius merchandising. It's the new man, isn't it? Bazzari, the new CEO. I mean, there's a lot of magic going on in the show, really.
I find it just as interesting for the kind of the merchandising and the branding and that kind of more businessy side of it as I do for the fashion. I think it's just fascinating.
Well, we see it more now.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
I think we feel it like, Joe just reeled off the name of the CEO. Obviously, she has to know her own work. But I think we do. We know the CEOs, and we kind of you get a sense of what they're up to as much as the forward-facing collection. But I think with the point that the kind of collections that seem to be slowing down, and we don't expect dramatic change each season, is also, I think, responding to the secondary market. Places like Vestiaire and things like that kind of thrive in people having just missed buying a certain piece. I think there is this really healthy second market now in people who kind of regretted buying this lean bum bag in Resort and kind of realised that Resort has ended. Because it's so blurry when things are actually in stores now.
But what's clever with Gucci is I think they walk a really fine line between doing something that is really consistent, but then enough of those kind of like silly, statement-y type things that become like a fad and get...
they know how to do an it shoe.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it was so culty. There were people who were wearing the piping suit. There were 12 editors on the front row were wearing the furry loafer.
They're so comfy.
They are so comfy.
But that's an astonishing thing to have done in like one season. He's done that since January. It's incredible, really, that it just became so sticky straight away.
So why did it work? Because it's interesting. I was thinking about this in the context of Milan with someone like him, because we're seeing a lot of those kind of appointments from the salt mines where it's someone who's been behind the scenes who's now kind of taking on a much more public role, and it works so well in this context. And then you know, maybe you guys disagree, but I think there are other contexts in Milan where it's just not sticking in the same way. So if you look at something like Jill Sander with Rodolfo Pagliolunga, it's just not that same pace and that same excitement around
People really like this show though.
Yeah, it got a lot more...
I found it, I just couldn't deal with the hats, so I sort of switched off after about 4 looks. But I think
know, hats are very distracting.
I found it really hard, but people liked it. It just didn't have the same sort of sense of relevance, I don't think.
Yeah. I disagree.
Why do you disagree?
Because I think there are definitely pieces in here which feel very relevant, like the jackets with the kind of, you know, just the shoulders creeping out. And there's these sort of slight hints, like without going the whole hog into a full-blown head-to-toe frills, gaps everywhere, which we love. There's subtle things like we're looking at this red.
I love that red.
So we love that. Yeah, there's definitely.
But I don't think people want to wear Jill Sander. I don't think there's I don't think there's that urgency about the label. I think they go, yeah, it's lovely and it looks nice and maybe fun. But if I think I want to buy a suit jacket, I'll probably go to Dior or go to. There's so many other places that they. So I think there is this brand.
It's the
presence.
branding thing,
And I don't feel that he's brought that.
I think it's really interesting what you said when we talked about the relevance. You said, you know, there are certain pieces, and I think in a way that's the problem. There are pieces that are beautiful, but as a whole thing, the collection and him and the brand,
But do you think that's because he's just honoured the codes of the house too dearly? Like, you know, if Alessandro Michele, he's gone in, he's thrown everything out and gone, here we go.
Well, I think
this is my house now. Whereas he's gone in going, you know, going to pay sort of all my debts to the Sander aesthetic.
Yeah, it's the weight of the inheritance, isn't
it? But I also think it wasn't what... I was thinking about this actually from what Alex Fury was saying about when we talked about New York. We were talking about Peter Copping and Oscar de la Renta, and we talked about, you know, why that's such a match made in heaven, and the fact that Oscar de la Renta, it was working. So in a way, there's markets that need to be growing, they need a bigger Asian presence, but it was working.
Yeah, Oscar de la Renta didn't need fixing.
Exactly. Whereas I think with Jill Sander, it wasn't completely... Obviously, there's an amazing heritage there, and she as a designer has been so influential. But I don't think in recent history
it's just
it was
horrible
quite
10 years.
Yeah, so you needed change, and I think that's part of the problem. Is it's not like you don't want a seamless transition in a way where it's very quietly and discreetly and politely done, because it needed a bit of a boost. Do you know what I mean?
Then you look at something like Pucci, and you're like, okay, that's when you go for that alternative approach, and you bring in your new kind of. You bring in your new aesthetic and everyone goes, oh, holy God, what have you done?
What did everyone...
Pucci and Cavalli?
Well, they were really interesting
Cavalli,
shows.
I thought was just genuinely terrible.
I thought it was awful.
It was the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like,
but
it was
loads
so
of
weird. Do you like it? I feel like it's the kind of thing you'd like.
It's a styling thing, isn't it? You know, it's like I get it from a styling point of view. I know what they're
you want a
trying
Guns
to
N'
do.
Roses sort of frou-frou skirt.
I like that it's younger.
But it was Jane Howe that styled it, wasn't it? Yeah.
So, and I get that aesthetic that she does and stuff, but I'm not sure with that hardcore customer that wants like a print dress. I was going to see that.
I thought what was really interesting is you've had the Pucci girl and you've had the Cavalli girl, which weren't 100 million miles removed.
Apart,
and I think, you know, for good or bad, I think there probably was a market for those girls who like, you know, that Ibiza party girl who's going to a wedding and kind of wants to wear that sort of kaftani beachy dress. And both the houses didn't serve them.
No.
And I was like, oh, where are they going to go?
Yeah.
But maybe the market was too small.
Yeah.
But I felt as though they just jettisoned a whole load of kind of customers in like 2 shows. Yeah. It was like frightening.
It's interesting thinking about when that market is too small though, because I wonder if it is, because there's obviously like some kind of commercial reasoning behind this of looking at what's selling and what's not. And I wonder if that, you know, that, as you say, the kaftani little party front market is just
not big enough.
Just disappearing.
I think for the, you know, the critical response over the last, you know, 4 or 5 years of seeing the sort of the animal print gown come down, you know, with the slash front, come down the catwalk, is probably, I think we probably shot the collection. The critics shot the collection because actually those dresses are fabulous. They are, you know, completely in their own right for that particular customer, as you said, who's going, you know.
Or like the Biarritz sort of set who want to sit on a yacht for like the summer. I think those are the clothes that work.
Which we loved, and you know, you don't miss them till they're gone.
But then it's interesting thinking about all the labels that serve that market and what's happening to them, because if you look at, you know, in London, Matthew Williamson, they're not doing shows at Fashion Week anymore. It's becoming much. So I wonder if all of those labels are having to kind of reposition and work in a different way. It's interesting that those kind of those brands that serve.
I'm
that
really
set.
tempted to start a label and kind of beach dresses just to see. Well, also I think that kind of vacation wear market.
But do you not think they wear like Isabel Marant and stuff now? Well, I wonder if it slightly moves on where they want to feel a little bit cool. I think
Isabel Marant is a massive buy, and it's definitely kind of but people like Lisa Marie Fernandez, I think, have like changed the kind of way that people are thinking about what they do. There's like a host of other kind of labels that are doing that sort of a thing.
But it's that /sexy evening wear that has kind of disappeared.
But do these women who are, a super rich contingency looking for, fabulous party dresses, are they going to wear a Gucci shirt dress? But do they care what's on the catwalk? Do they not?
I don't.
It's boutique shopping. It's going for
And I think what's in the store will not. This will be minimal.
Yes, exactly.
The pre-collection will be that slashed dress because that's what they sell and they have to do it.
So then, what was the point of it?
I think.
Industry.
Because everyone's obsessed with Gucci and Prada, you've got to make a statement, and this is the way that they try to do it. I think definitely. At least we're talking about it. We're not just like.
I'm talking about it, but I genuinely, maybe this is ignorance on my part, I just cannot understand it. I can't work out what is trying to be said.
I mean, the weird things he did to the sort of silhouette as well. The Cavalli women, it's like naked shoulders, big. I mean, we're now looking at the one dress that actually does have naked shoulders, a big skirt. But like the silhouette was all changed. It was all big in the shoulders. It was biker jackets with the sleeves removed. It was like these crotch short skirts. Yeah. So it's like, why have you done that? Yeah. And he was just like, well, I think, my clothes appeal to everyone between the ages of 15 and 80. And I was like, that is just not true. Yeah. There's no 80-year-old going to wear those things.
Yeah. We're looking particularly at a bodycon peach dress with a kind of frill going around the perimeter.
Very strange.
I do wonder though, like, I've heard that they had quite radically restyled it hours before the show, like quite late on in the day, to make it look less bourgeois. Okay. And I wonder whether actually, if you kind of could have a rummage through it all and redo it, would it have looked
very different?
A lot more kind of restrained?
There's a lot of rummaging happening in Milan, isn't there? Rummaging through Gucci,
It's not a rummage.
But it is interesting you say that, because the one thing that really stood out for me of this was the belts, and it felt like, when you're getting dressed and you don't quite know what to wear,
you shove a belt on,
and you kind of go, "Oh God, I'll wear a belt," and it's sort of like the belts really stood out for me because it felt like you'd almost flipped through, the top half, the bottom half, and kind of really done this blend, and perhaps it is that blend, that really odd mix, which is quite jarring now to look at, but maybe next season, you're used to it.
But I just have no idea where this would go next season. I can't, with Gucci, you could pick out, you could kind of sum that up in like 3 themes, and three, like, you'd be like vintage, cluttered, androgynous, and you're like, that's what it is, that's what's gonna be next season. With this, I'm like,
but is this not sort of chasing the Saint Laurent market? I would have thought. Yeah. I mean, to me, it just looks like someone looking at like the profits and the doubling in sales at Saint Laurent and going, okay, right, it's all about little kind of tiny dresses but and Saint Laurent is still a ready-to-wear label, like principal sales are ready-to-wear. I don't know about Cavalli. I don't know what else they kind of. It's not about Cavalli bags, is it?
No, not.
So I assume that's what they're thinking. They're sort of repositioning it for a kind of youthful, culty sort of street thing.
This particular trio of images we've got here is very interesting, actually, because it is 3 completely different.
Yeah, it's completely
moods.
Like the middle is very like that jacket could have been stolen from a Saint Laurent collection.
But it's an Italian's version of Saint Laurent, basically.
It is.
It's just a bit more pattern and a bit more colour, and it's not as slick.
But I have to say that the nadir of this show was definitely that tank dress with the big cats and the pink belt. I mean, really, that was the point where I was like, oh, this is.
But that looks like Le Bershka or something. It's like really weird.
It was definitely unexpected, and there is the belt. I'm looking at that belt. It's in that kind of peachy nude. The colours as well were really
strange colours.
Were not easy on the eye. I think it just. Maybe this is just. I'm holding out that this is just the eye adjusting.
Yeah,
it's different. It was such a shock.
Yeah,
it was so different.
But then I think that is the pressure on designers that they feel like they have to do something. It was exactly what Andrew was saying. That is so kind of statementy and so jarring that it'll but it's just
talking point.
Yeah, exactly. But this did feel like a little bit. You know, sometimes when you go to a collection, it feels like it's been done by a trend forecaster rather than a designer. Some of this felt a bit like that. Like that look on the left that's like could be a Saint Laurent look. If you just showed me that catwalk still, you'd be like, oh, that's Saint Laurent. And then there were other bits that were old, so it looked like they were trying to, as you were saying, see what's working for other people and kind of try and jam it all in, which was a bit strange. But then maybe there's obviously an element of trying to bring in a younger shopper, I guess, trying to grow certain categories.
I think youth has become this slightly obsessional focus for most of the houses. I mean, they all talk about it. They're all obsessed with looking at Instagram and seeing what people are wearing. And there's this kind of there's this huge thing about like what you wear has got to be identified on your feed, and it's probably only getting one show, and it's all about these kind of very sort of...
Do you think it's like a creative obsession that something like the designers are obsessed with, or do you think the business minds are also obsessed with like genuinely trying to get young people to spend?
I think young people are spending, so I think it's kind of a circular thing. But I mean, I was surprised at how many designers talked about wanting to, aspire to this youthful audience. I mean, I sort of always think, well, why aren't you going after the 45-year-olds who've got all the money?
It's really
why
strange.
is it always about the 18-year-olds? So I wonder whether that is to do with the fact that you get an enormous amount more exposure on sort of social media now, or wherever it is, through these sort of young kind of style icon type people, whoever they are. And that sort of is the way you get your message out, which is changing the focus of it all.
But do you think then it's just speaking to the same community? Because going back to those, say, 40-something women who have a big spending power, I wonder how much they are influenced by seeing some 23-year-old influencer wearing it on.
I don't even know
really
if they're looking.
Yeah, exactly. So then
if
you
had any sense, they'd be at Salvatore Ferragamo, which was such a beautiful show.
Yeah,
Did you like it?
I love
those
that.
were beautiful. Look at that. It's delicious. And also it's interesting. I love the way they did leather.
And it's not cluttered.
It's not cluttered.
There isn't earrings and bags and belts.
There's such beautiful looks in this collection, and I think it was it's a shame it's scheduled where it is, because otherwise I think
really
it would get
a
much greater sort of show. But I think this was probably one of the best collections in Milan, actually.
One of the standout collections of the whole month. I just thought it's just beautiful. It's how women want to dress. It's got this fluidity, this femininity, but it feels purposeful, it feels serious. Also, the shoes are great, the lengths are great. It felt, the styling is beautiful, the earrings are artful enough, but without feeling kind of trophy or extravagant. It's beautiful. It really, really, really is beautiful. The colour selection is amazing, the grooming's amazing.
But unquestionably, is quite sober, so I suppose doesn't sort of leap out as something that is immediately kind of conversational.
No, definitely not.
But I mean, after I sort of came home and looked back through pictures, like, God, that show was amazing. It was really, really lovely.
Did you notice a lot of that this season, of this kind of, Instagrammable moments and all of that? And I think for a long time that affected the whole theatre of the shows. You felt a lot more like everything was much more social media generated, but I think now it's impacting design so much more than it was before. It feels like everything's got to be punchy, everything's got to be a bit silly, everything's got to have a little bit of a gimmick. And it's interesting that we keep saying the word cluttered. I think that's definitely tailored at that kind of grab. It worries me that it's got to a point where it is impacting design. But then maybe it goes back to what you're saying about how it changes how people wear stuff. Like if people are wearing stuff in a way where they wear it mainly online, they wear it, they Instagram themselves wearing it, they tag themselves wearing it, whatever it is. They want something that's really punchy, that they only wear once. So maybe it is changing what people buy.
I mean, there are some shows that serve a totally different function from others. I mean, you take this show, which is clearly, obviously a lot of these clothes aren't going to go into production and they won't probably even be in shops. It's all about the shoes really, isn't it? But they're still lovely and it all worked together. And then you've got like Moschino, which is selling by the truckload, iPhone covers and all the rest of it. And that is a show purely, as far as I can see, purely staged as a platform for social media purposes. And does really, really, really well out of it.
I hate it so much.
I quite enjoyed this one.
I think we were talking about this before we started. I think, thank God for Moschino.
Really?
Yeah, because I don't identify with the Moschino woman, but someone's got a sense of humour about things.
But I don't even think it's funny. I don't think it's funny.
I know. Well, you know what? I wouldn't laugh out loud at this.
I did. I laughed out loud.
Did
you?
Times.
Yeah, I did. I laughed. And I kind
of
thought...
Why did you laugh?
I laughed at, I did find the sort of Chanel suits in caution tape. I just thought that's really quite clever. Sorry. I mean, the last two collections, the Barbie one I thought was atrocious. I thought the, what was the one they did? Oh, the sort of Looney Tunes one. It just was like, I was so bored. There were so many looks. It just was like endless. But this one, I just thought, this is really quite amusing as a sort of postmodern 1980s supermodel revisit done with kind of, traffic cones. Why not? I just kind of found it quite funny. And I think I was saying I went to see it after Prada, which was so sort of dull and serious, that I just thought, oh, maybe I just fancy, it just depends what day you see it.
I can't imagine you in the skin.
I would never wear it.
No, but this...
you will. You're his biggest fan. I'm going to see you next time. You'll be in that.
I think you have to appreciate what he does.
Yeah.
There is a lot of stuff in here, like...
People fucking love it.
There's some cracking gowns later on as well. I would really quite happily. There's that great Cadillac gown with the lights and it's sort of
the tail lights that were flashing.
Yeah, I mean, okay, maybe I wouldn't take, but I thought the dress itself was really quite great.
Yeah,
I'm so surprised by this. It's the weirdest thing that's ever happened.
No, I think, come on, we all need a bit of humour.
It can get so po-faced, you talk to people about the beauty and the line and the woman and blah, 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 blah. And I think so sometimes you think, oh, okay, actually, someone actually understands fashion for being, slightly frivolous, silly thing that it is.
Yeah.
And they'll sell all those little bags with their silly road signs on it or whatever.
Yeah.
And fair dues, really.
Well, it does. I like the brazenness of it because I think there's a lot of people who, as you said, very po-faced, very kind of, try to present this feeling of being very elevated and removed from all of this, but then they're making their money by doing these gimmicky bags, gimmicky accessories. Like so many people, so many serious brands are doing that now, and it's like like so many bags with road signs, so many like.
I know, which is when you think don't do that. But with Jeremy Scott, it's like you've got a license to do that. Do what you want.
What do you think? Do you find it all a bit too much?
I mean, I liked Franco Moschino, so I liked that subtle, clever wit. His,
not so subtle, wasn't it?
I liked the suit that said this jacket cost £800. I like that kind of humour and that statement kind of thing. I mean, I don't think anybody's selling clothes. I think it's all about bags and accessories and stuff, and this is going to make people buy bags and accessories, isn't it?
Yeah.
No one's going to go and ask for a dishwasher dress. Do you know what I mean?
Tragically.
Katy Perry.
Have you got
that's the other thing, like when you see those looks immediately afterwards on the red carpet. I mean, he's obviously got he's got a clientele that's on the red carpet all the time and does wear him. Yeah. So to that extent, it's another...
And the same with Peter Dundas. It's like he's got a great celebrity following and stuff, so even if the collection's pants, girls are going to wear it because he's very friendly.
He's very nice.
Yeah. Same with Jeremy. Yeah. And you've got good friends.
That's like the big thing as well. We've talked about a few themes that makes a house successful. This idea of like revolution when you rebrand, but also that gang thing is like. I know it's an age-old thing in fashion, but it's so prevalent now. It's like you need your little squad. It's absolutely bonkers. Because he was trying to start a hashtag, like there was the Bowman Army. He was trying to start what was like Cavalli Lady or something.
And Ricardo, his gang thing. I mean, that's all it's about, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's really, really strange.
Although, on that other element, you don't get like the hashtag Prada. Well, you suppose you get Girl and Mimi, but Prada's always had its own gang because it's just cerebral and it just understands that it's part of a gang without having to actually sort of make a sort of signed contract.
Yeah.
But it was quite interesting, I think, to see in Milan where Prada sits or is sitting because it's, I think, having an interesting moment.
Why'd you say that?
Well, I felt that show, much though I absolutely adore Prada, just felt a bit removed from what else is going on at the moment. It just felt a bit too it felt very contrived in some ways. And not very beautiful, which I thought, I think the Prada woman's always been this kind of incredible creature who's both sort of very seductive and intellectual, and it's the two things coming together and sort of working brilliantly. And this felt like the intellectual was sort of winning out a bit, and it all got a bit too conceptual and overstyled, and it's like, where am I going to see this?
Do you think that's quite reactionary to that sense, though, of like, as you say, Prada's identity, as everyone else becomes even more kind of fast-paced and frivolous, is even more kind of intellectual. Yeah, it's kind of like, I think it's quite stubbornly removed from that.
But then I think in a season broadly where we saw so many exciting new ideas in femininity. Femininity really headlined across, you know, all the 4 fashion weeks. This definitely went the other way. And I think what we've probably got conditioned to seeing with Prada is Mrs. Prada interpreting the broad trends in a, you know, or going her own way, but in some way it steers the season. Yeah. And this striked very much a different note to that femininity. It was very buttoned up. There was a lot happening here. The whole area here, which seems to be something which designers are very stripping back and revealing and exposing in new ways, felt very covered. And I think that did signal this mood which kind of felt heavier. The stripes are very heavy. It's a very different moment. But then I think if you asked us the same question in a few months' time, when probably the high street is saturated with everything frills and everything, you know, though it's sort of
will it be like a wonderful palette cleanser?
Yeah, will we look at Prada and think, thank God she didn't do that?
It's interesting what you talked about there with that sense of her kind of setting the pace for the season, because I felt like what's happened for the last maybe even like 4 seasons, maybe less, maybe 3 or so, it felt like rather than setting the pace, it's like she's almost offering, as you say, a complete opposite to what everyone else is doing.
An antidote, a very, very clever antidote.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this just seems to be, it's very, very, very different. I think the Prada customer is going to want to, you know, to buy the striped coat that we've got. You know, we've just had Freeze. There is so much Prada that you see around. Women will always want to wear it. It's just a very different moment.
I think the thing that I find interesting about it is it's quite rare to see clothes that are difficult to wear still. You know, a lot of what we see is like it's quite easy to, it's very that kind of like, it's either very laid back and relaxed, kind of what we were saying about Ferragamo in some ways. It looks like you could just put it on and feel great. Or it's kind of eclectically kind of, you know, whack it all on together quite Gucci, whereas this is still that kind of like clothes that, you know, you'd spend a lot of money on and feel quite cautious when you wore them. And that's the only thing that I find strange about it, is a lot of the collections
I definitely think there's a mood for wearability that has come through, probably because as a result of the kind of crash and economic, you know, people have had to sort of refocus. They can't be too...
Well, this doesn't look comfortable to me.
No, it doesn't. That's the thing. The clothes look prickly.
But as a stylist, it's quite a good proposition.
Yeah, for me, it jumps off a page. You don't need to do much to it, but it's like, who wants to look like a painting by a young artist? Or
well, that's what's strange, because she loves women so much and is so informed and intelligent, obviously sets such a pace and is so respected. But it's not the most sympathetic collection for women, and a lot of her designs aren't, in the terms of like, they are difficult to wear, and you're being in some way restricted and owned by your clothing if you wear Prada, which is strange.
I was looking back though at the kind of, you know, the geek chic, you know, the woman who invented it after all. I thought, well, I'll have a look back at the, you know, the collection in '96, and you think that was so straightforward. It was just like a herringbone tweed skirt in a slightly sort of unusual shape for the time that wasn't considered sexy, but in Milan was considered particularly unsexy, with a V-neck sweater, and you know, all these elements are still there. She still does the like graphic knit. She's still got the jacket. She's still using a lot of the same materials. But it felt like it's just come so far on from that, and it's become much more of a kind of artistic proposition than it has actually about a kind of wardrobe that women want to wear. Because I felt like back then it was a solution. These clothes are not, for me, I don't think, a solution, especially.
No. But I think it's become removed from the idea of genuinely suggesting and setting the pace of how women should be dressing. And as you say, it's much more of a kind of conceptual statement. I think it's quite removed.
But for her, I think it sits with the foundation, and I think that's what it's about.
It's interesting to think of the context of how they're operating at the moment, because it's difficult times for Prada as a business, and I keep reading that when I look at the collections. You know, you keep reading into them and thinking, you know, what are they trying to say here? You know, when they did that the men's one, when they had all the women in it, when they first kind of really started with that mixed gender thing, and it was very black and grey and completely no colour, and everyone said it was such a safe collection, and that's why they were doing it. And I always look at this and just think, what are they trying to do? You know, what categories are they trying to grow? How are they trying to reposition themselves?
Well, they keep saying they're going to sort of develop this £1,200 handbag or $1,200 handbag, which is, you know, which they haven't had this hit handbag for a really long time, and it's becoming kind of a sort of holy grail, I think, in Prada headquarters. I'm not sure whether Mrs. Prada cares in that sense. I mean, she's always sort of taking kind of quite a lot of pride, I think, in not muddying her hands with like commercial viability. But I certainly sort of saw the accessories here as not quite delivering on the same way. But maybe that's because there weren't as many of them for starters.
But maybe it is about creating this sense of like collections that are super artistic, as we were saying, super elevated, you know, very removed from kind of like, as we say, wearability and ease, to try and then be able to offer product that is so expensive that it kind of feels like, oh, of course, because Prada is art as fashion. And, you know, I think it's interesting to think about. It's interesting also to think in the context of the fact that they've launched a Miu Miu fragrance, in terms of like, you think about how they're trying to push the more commercial opportunities elsewhere.
Miu Miu's going great guns, so they're fine in that respect. But also, I think it's that other thing that I was saying earlier. It's that idea that if with each season you bring a proposition, and she genuinely does. It's like, it's lace, it's brocade, it's like, you know, home furnishing fabrics or whatever. You know, there's always something that's like the idea, and then that percolates down. What I think is changing is the sense that there is necessarily a seasonal idea, because then also her pre-collection stuff looks nothing like this. So but even then, so she revisits fabrics and ideas and cuts, and then she'll reissue things. So it's just this business model of the shows, I think, is just so interesting from the point of view of actually what you're getting in shops, when you're getting it in shops, and to what extent this idea will kind of influence whatever else is happening. I mean, you're so used to seeing Prada being ripped off by every other designer the next year. I mean, I'll just be interested to know what they take away from this.
This is really difficult to kind of break down as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think though, looking at it like this, I was seeing it now as a kind of stream. She really is doing the summer coats so well, and I think perhaps it's that which is eclipsing the handbags. What I think's interesting though is that there doesn't seem to be. It's not easy in the way that there's no kind of. The sort of sporty side of Prada, I think, has kind of slipped away with this. It doesn't seem to be accessible to what's happening on the street.
No. But that's what, it was really interesting, Jay, you described the Prada woman as a creature, and I think that's actually quite a good way of putting it, because you look at this and she does seem like this kind of amazing, almost like object, like this vision. It's very removed, as you say, from kind of like running around, having a life, like being a woman. It's very much.
I mean,
like
this show was sort of like an intellectual allegory, isn't it? She starts off in the suits and she's quite closed and it's brown, and then she sort of emerges in lace and sequins and paillettes as a kind of woman of the evening. Like, you know, there was a narrative. It was like, you know, it wasn't just a load of crap on a catwalk, which is what so many other collections are.
But I think she's at a time of her life where she's thinking about the legacy that she's going to leave and how she's going to be remembered. And I think we'll all remember like a minimal dress and a backpack, but I think she's going for something else because she wants to be remembered for other things as well.
What will happen after Mrs. Prada chooses to resign? I think about this all the time. Just sit at my desk thinking.
I'm sure the guy Fabio that does it will stay forever and continue to work.
But do you think they'll do a not really appoint a...
Yeah, definitely. It'll just be him. He's been there forever. He's done the men's and the women's and the union.
Yeah.
He's a great coordinator between all the brands. I think that would be him.
It's a big question that sort of always hung over Milan, isn't it? As well, like what's going to happen when all these people stop being there? I mean, Cavalli's gone, and Armani's still there, very much so. But it is still kind of, you know, you do think, oh God, you know, watch and wait and see. I mean, Prada less so, she's a lot younger. Let's say that out loud, she's a lot younger. But it is still that sort of legacy project, and you know where you're going. I mean, Armani was, you know, it was his 40th year anniversary. There's been celebrations all year. The show was like followed by a kind of Q&A. It was a big moment for him in that sense. But I mean, the collection's sort of neither here nor there in many ways.
That hat,
biggest brand in the world, though. makes so much money. You sort of go, fair enough, mate. You know what you're doing.
Just does what he wants.
He knows what he's doing, and nothing we can say will ever affect that. He knows exactly what he's doing.
So strange, though. It's just
And I sort of do love the fact that there's a man, you know, aged 80, standing backstage, sort of like, you know, touching up the makeup, styling it all, putting on the, you know, another bracelet, another, you know, shoe. It's like there's, you know, in that world of like overstyled, other people kind of actually sort of apparently having responsibility for labels. This is like, you know, it's his show.
It's his show, yeah. That is interesting.
And he'll do whatever the hell he wants. And if it's 85 looks, then there you are.
There it is.
You will get there.
But it is interesting that when there's so much, you know, styling as design, as you were saying, you know, so much where you're like, exactly that, like who's actually designing it? It's not the designer, it's the styler, you know, all of that. And all of that conversation is just so completely removed from this. It's just like, all right, here it is.
You're getting a pure designer vision there, which I think actually, you know, you get more and more respect for, I think, the more you go to different cities and you see the shows and who's actually kind of working backstage. It's kind of refreshing to see somebody who's got that absolute sort of rigor and control and authority of their own, you know, and confidence.
Yeah, completely.
Because I think that's what... That's what so much of it is about, is confidence as a designer, isn't it? You're going to go out there and you're going to announce it, and then you're going to stick by your guns, and you're not going to like respond to people when they go, I hate it.
And it's not any girl you ever know the name of, but I like that you don't know these girls.
Yeah, the models like, you have to stay behind on the Monday.
These randoms that are in Milan.
It's so strange. But it's interesting just thinking about kind of, we've talked a lot about like focus and, you know, complete confidence in an idea. And one thing that I'm going to find really interesting over the next, like, you know, couple of seasons or even like next year or so is seeing all the kind of other stuff catch up with the new aesthetics. I was thinking about it a lot because of Dior. When you look at how, obviously the divisions are so separate, when you look at how out of step perfume advertising is compared to what's happening on the runway. And I was thinking about that a lot with Gucci, whether they will launch a kind of fussy old lady perfume that kind of fits more with the aesthetic.
I think that's all, I'm sure that's all coming.
Yeah, but it's going to be so exciting to see that, isn't it? Because at the moment you see the Gucci perfume stuff and it's like so weirdly out of step with what's happening.
And he's an accessories man. I mean, so he's kind of, you know, that's sort of his true understanding
of the takeaway.
Is the takeaway.
Yeah. I think that idea of sort of coherent brands overall, but then I don't know if they worry that much about that. Gucci's obviously a different thing because they definitely should, because there is this, you know, there is this identity with it. You look at Celine and the beautiful lipstick. It just, I think there is this idea of, you know, this beauty is very it's kind of people are very light-handed with it now, you know. It's very stripped back, and then there's little signatures. You know, if Celine sold that particular shade of lipstick in store, I mean, it would be like a huge selling point. Yeah, because they're so involved in this look.
But it's you know, Angie said, you know, no one's selling ready to wear, and you think that's what's so strange is that all the brands are so smartly pushing their accessories. And it's like they'd never allow a shoe to go out that was completely removed from what they're doing.
I know, and I mean that must be the Dior. It's so kind of curious anyway, because there's sort of beauty and the campaigns, and there's not like there's very little kind of synergy between all the different elements. And that's why, you know, they've all these sort of new contracts that are being signed give everyone total control over everything. And I totally understand that.
I really understand it, but you feel like they're missing a trick in some ways. Like I think. With the new Gucci, you do think, we're all talking about stuff you can buy into, but there's nothing you can buy into more than beauty and fragrance, and you think, I'm just waiting for that, you know, like a bottle covered in gems.
I think he's so into photography and film and filmmaking that I think that will slowly seep into, like I heard that there was the new bag and campaign that's just all these bees coming out of the bag and stuff, so I think he's really thinking about it and not just sticking it on a celebrity. And
but the celebrities they work with are quite weird. I was really surprised with the Georgia May Jagger thing at the Met. That just felt really, really random.
They had like 4 people at the Met in Gucci though, didn't they? I think they won in terms of
but I don't think they had anyone like fat, you know, you like do you all have like the good people, Prada have the really good people, Gucci has like, they need to get some like weird cluttered person, like who, but I can't think who would work really well for them.
I think they're desperately seeking ambassadors, aren't they? They've got those like a few half-baked English celebrities that they ship out there, but
but it's weird. It's not people who are that cool.
I don't feel that cool.
No, not, like Georgia May Jagger doesn't make me like, oh, she's an intellectual woman who wears glasses and like, you know,
but she's an absolute babe. Does Gucci need it?
No, I don't know. I'm just thinking.
I don't think they need it. It's not a red carpet
I think they need it in the way that Prada have it, where it's quite. It's exactly what Joe was saying. It's quite understated. It doesn't feel like they've signed a contract, and they have to, I think they need it in that sense of like this vibe of women adoring wearing Gucci because they intellectually identify with it.
But I don't see him creating this gang where he's on Instagram. I think he's a private person. He's not interested in celebrity.
Did you see the pictures of his house though?
Yeah.
God, that made me love him so much because it made me like, actually, he's like, this is the life he leads. Like, he's just this weird man, like collecting eggs and stuff. I think he's amazing. I'm really obsessed with him.
But going back to the beauty thing though, I think Dior, you can't compare Dior and Gucci because Dior has so much sort of science behind its beauty and its skincare, and I think the person who's going in to Selfridges to buy their Dior face cream, their Dior, you know, their serums that they absolutely love, it's so set apart from it's not like the fragrance is a whole arm in itself, and makeup is.
Yeah, but Tom Ford managed it. I mean, and did it incredibly quickly when you think about it. And that's just a very simple.
But it's interesting with Saint Laurent how they've completely
separate.
You wonder, like, would there be a Saint Laurent perfume? You know, it's strange. It's like no one wants to touch beauty. It's really, really interesting. I just find it I find that whole thing absolutely fascinating.
It's a question of time. You think how many collections they're doing a year? It must be like.
But then you think that girl who buys the Zara or Topshop version of the Saint Laurent thing, she loves that look. You know, she's probably seen it.
She probably goes, but she won't know. Also, she won't know when she goes to buy her Touche Éclat and her whatever else it is. She's not going to sit there saying, "Oh, is this Hedi's concealer?"
But do you not think if there was something...
I think it's just brand awareness.
Yeah. But do you not think if there was something she could buy into that was Saint Laurent, like a Saint Laurent perfume that was very specific to that kind of grungy festival aesthetic thing that he does?
But then you could have the separation between the boutique on Bond Street hosting 1 or 2, 5-piece beauty collection, and then the department store, Debenham selling, everything. I think there's definitely this idea, there's tiers in each brand. There's definitely tiers, and I think, as Joe was saying, there's like consciousness, depending on what people know as.
Yeah.
The girl who wants to, the really sexy young 18-year-old who wants to get the Saint Laurent look is going to be smudging Barry M eyeliner under her eyes. I think there isn't this same standing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Who have we missed? We haven't talked about Versace. We haven't talked that much about Bottega. We haven't talked about Fendi.
Fendi either.
Yeah, what did everyone think of Fendi? What did everyone think of Bottega?
Joe?
I liked Fendi. I really liked it.
You just found everything really funny. You just had a great time. She was just laughing into that.
I like the colours. I thought I loved the leather kind of blouse and sort of medieval jester thing. I thought it was great.
I find Fendi just weird because I can't work out who it's.
I don't think any of this goes into the store either.
No,
it's like it's a lizard coat that goes into the store. That's it. And it's
weird that monster thing because they must be terrified of when people stop wanting those monsters.
Well, they've tried. I think a lot.
The bag bugs.
They've tried to really pull back. I think from that. From the bugs themselves in the last couple of years, because I think they did kind of get a bit overwhelmed.
I spoke to a buyer who works for like a multi-brand retailer, and he was saying kind of the same with the Valentino like studded trainers. It's that thing where they sell out so quickly. Yeah. But he was like, so you want to make this huge order, 1,000 pairs.
And then he was like,
you're always scared of that moment where no one wants it anymore, and then you've literally got like 1,000 bugs. And you're like,
there weren't any. I don't think there were any bugs in autumn winter, and I can't remember if there were bugs in spring summer.
In the men's, there's so much bugs.
Yeah.
There's like hoods that turn you into a bug if you put them up.
Fendi make a great bag. They make a great bag, and I think Sylvia Fendi's so brilliant at kind of identifying little niche things, and she's very good at the kind of item, and I think they've exploited it really cleverly.
Yeah, for sure.
The silhouette's lovely. I mean, the look we're looking at now on the right, that waistline and the volume in the sleeves, it's a grown-up Italo-eccentric version of stuff that's happening elsewhere. I do think it's really, really lovely to look at. It's not, completely gripping, but it's nice to look at. I mean, there's always like the sort of flared mini silhouette, and the dress with the zip up. It does deliver, but as you say, you don't see this
I just find it really hard to enjoy that. Yeah, I can't engage with stuff if I just don't think it has any life, and I think that's if it really exists. Yeah, it doesn't exist exactly.
With Fendi,
I mean, that green jacket, I just love. I love that jacket.
I know.
I think it's fantastic.
That sumptuousness of the leather, they do texture.
I loved all those like 80s leathers at Milan, like the Jill Sander red and that, and there was like, just really kind of like sort of Soviet bloc leathers. I thought they were great.
And the pulled back hair, I mean, that jacket's great. Fendi, please make that jacket. It's, it's lovely, and the colours are always very interesting. I mean, the pairing of that kind of salmony, thickening salmon pink with the sort of corally reds.
Yeah, nice, because I think Fendi can seem terribly heavy. And
really heavy.
Just heavy. Yeah. And this just, there was a nice sort of pop.
But then now, it looks like we're looking at a different show now.
Yeah.
Right?
This moved it. Well, we've still got a bit of the old smocking going on.
And normally
there.
It's like super futuristic and flashy and plasticky, really, so that's...
Yeah.
Maybe this is a chicer version.
I think it's weird, particularly now Gucci feels so relevant. It's just weird seeing stuff, as I say, when you're like, what is it, like, who's going to engage with this? Where's it going to be? It's that weird thing with the point of the fashion show and the point of it just feels like you think. I've been thinking about it so much more this season, like where you're like, why am I here? Why are people analysing these clothes that aren't going to?
Nice to see so much sort of full. I mean, that's not particularly sort of indicative of it, but the mid calf and long sleeve. Yeah. It's great to see all that back again, and like volume, like the sort of volume and shape and silhouette. I thought it was quite a flattering season.
Yeah, that's true.
Bottega was similarly, I think, had its.
I really liked Bottega. I thought it was really beautiful.
I thought it was. I thought it's quite interesting to see Bottega and Versace, because they're both sort of playing with the camo and like how each did it. I thought Versace was really good. But I think as a point of comparison, I quite liked looking at those two together.
Versace's interesting because it's like I like Versace best when it just is Versace, and it's very like
print.
Yeah, when the shows where it's like when you go to the D Squared show and they don't do like a naked person, and you're like, oh, that was a shame. Yeah. I kind of feel like
swimwear and heels.
Yeah, exactly.
I know. D Squared delivers fantastically on that front.
Completely bonkers.
And it's fun and it's sexy. Okay, this is quite buttoned up. I don't know. I don't know.
But it doesn't feel super young. Like I think everybody else is doing super young.
Yeah,
and she's got a suit, and she's going to IPO as well, I think, and they're in profit. They're selling really well. She put in like up until that show, I literally hadn't seen one suit anywhere. Like not in New York, not in London. Yeah. It was like, oh my god, there's a khaki suit that is really good and like it was like she's got that. She's got that experience. She's got great cutting. The shape of the suits, silhouettes are lovely. I mean, it's possibly a bit more restrained, but I couldn't be doing with any more Diamante hashtag at like. No,
that was very strange.
I just can't. That doesn't speak to me at all.
But I think it's obviously. I think it's interesting for her having Anthony Vaccarello at Versus, because I think it probably makes her see. Which is kind of what that hashtag collection was kind of about. She talked about like seeing Versace through a young person's eyes, and like how they saw it made her think about it differently.
So maybe this does go up. I mean, what?
I think they're definitely redefining their kind of brackets. And he's doing such a fantastic job there.
Did you like the Versus collection? I just found it awful.
Not that one especially.
No, but it's a great fit. Like, as in,
I thought his first collection blowing my mind. No, I thought it was just fantastic. I thought this is like perfect. I feel like sort of
inside of you have this Moschino wearing Versace girl that just needs to come out. Do you have a separate wardrobe at home where you're like, when you're not around the fashion?
I think I just really like it on other people.
You've got like a McDonald's Moschino
I think we did see a lot of suiting across the 4 weeks, and I think what was interesting about Versace suiting was the trouser shape. It wasn't this super spray-on thing. A lot of these silhouettes are much more relaxed. It's like the kind of classic Versace silhouette's gone into kind of blurred focus a bit. It was a bit more easygoing. You didn't feel like not every look required Spanx. Basically, it was like a different kind of mood.
But then maybe that is because the Versus is the much more young, tiny.
I like that. I think there's always a place for that slashed navel revealing.
Well, if you can't get it at Cavalli anymore, then you need to get it at Versace.
There we go, and I thought, you know...
Jo needs her sexy shirt.
I need to see it.
Jo needs it.
I think that there's another thing going on with these, like, diffusion and main collection, and, like, a lot of people are just jettisoning it and being like, let's bring it in together. Like, Cavalli's lost Just Cavalli, Marc Jacobs lost Marc by Marc. There's DKNY is now not without it. So they're all kind of... you know, getting together. This is a brand that seems to be doing the other thing. It's going with that, like, okay, no, we're two things.
I think they're trying to do the Prada Miu Miu thing, where you're like,
well, they've just like completely disassociated now, aren't they?
Yeah.
And that I think that would be really interesting to see developing moving forward. Like,
that's a really good point.
What's relevant now, and like Versace, I suppose, is relevant because you buy it straight off the catwalk on screen, and it's very sort of speaks to that market that everyone's after. But this is presumably a slightly, you know, it's a slightly different thing. But whether or not it's going to become the older woman, I mean, I don't think.
I just wonder if it'll become more tasteful, like if it'll become more luxury, elevated, you know, less of the kind of chintz, because obviously if they're trying to carve out the kind of younger, more rapid market, they'll go for the gimmicks more in Versace.
And also Versace is cheap, comparatively.
Compared to
it's really like, you know,
it delivers a silhouette rather than, you know, all the kind of craftsmanship and embellishment that goes into this. Some great dress there. That's Jo's dress in the middle. Slash guy.
Yes, the asymmetry.
Asymmetric kind of, you know, hiding the boobs.
But in a classic black, just to keep it cheap. So was it a strong season in Milan then? It's interesting, we've had so much food for thought, which usually, you know, when we do our roundup panels, I look forward to the Milan one the least, because there's just less to say, and everyone just always ends up talking about how boring Milan is, which we haven't done at all. It feels like it's a really interesting time.
There's so much going on, it's like bonkers.
Wasn't it fun?
Yeah.
I thought Milan was my favourite, actually, probably. Just in terms of like, it sort of seemed to be where the crucible of all the ideas that are going on at the moment. I thought New York was very bland. London was sort of London. I didn't feel like it moved on a lot, and then most of the kind of collections seemed to be offering sort of more of the same. And then I got to Milan, it was like, and it's fantastic having Gucci open that week, because it's like, right, we're in it, here we are, it's sort of like all begun. And then everything else is, you know, you do that thing where you're like, everything else is like kind of compared to moment.
Yeah, but that's interesting, because Paris is so like all over the place in terms of...
And it has like peaks and troughs, and you know, there's a day...
And it's hard to draw themes, whereas Milan feels like there's a big creative statement discussion.
Paris, I felt, thematically was so consistent. Like, it was like the same 4 trends reinterpreted like everywhere, whereas this was, I found it really hard to find trends in, because it was quite random.
But maybe that goes back to what we were saying about brands and labels having their distinct identity, and they don't really engage with seasonal changes. It's much more like people have their idea and they go with that. I think it's harder.
I think people have given up on trends. It's like you know, how many more eras can we go through? It's like the future, 60s, 40s.
Well, the designers hate trends, don't they? They can't bear it. They have to like lump their sort of, you know, camo t-shirt into the same category as somebody else. Yeah. But the readers still like it. They love to be told. They want to be told. Yeah. Go and buy a bit of silver.
It's the truth. It's the thing. Whenever you tell anyone you work in fashion, they're like, "So what should I be wearing?" And you're like, "I don't give a fuck." Like, I don't know. But it is the truth. It's like that's what people always do. So maybe it's right. It's still that notion of a trend.
I think with Paris is, you know, it's the old guard and the new guard. There seems like there's 2 completely separate explosive scenes. Milan felt like the old guard,
but a bit wacky.
Going through a sabbatical of, I don't know,
having a midlife crisis.
Going through. We're not going to say a word of that. Going through it was Milan's Renaissance.
Yeah. Well, they're never going to be the city of the young designer. You know, that's a whole separate conversation about like the problems Milan has with getting young designers, and it's much better than it was, obviously, and Armani's actually been great for that, obviously, with the show space and that kind of support. But that's why it is interesting, because when the kind of establishment aren't exciting, the whole city doesn't feel exciting, and because the establishment is so exciting now, it just feels like it's got this new life, but real like power behind it. Like, it's interesting, we talked a lot in London about like, you know, androgyny and people kind of pushing genderless stuff, and we kind of all said, you know, it's great and it's interesting when you see it in London or in like with Hibayer in New York or something like that, but when you see something more like that at Gucci, it just feels really exciting, because it's so big and and that means so much to have a house like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pushing change.
You know, that kind of flamboyance, when it's done that well at Gucci and it's that interesting, you know, it's bound to set a really exciting precedent.
I do think though, you know, there is a tiny sort of, you know, caveat that we shouldn't kind of just be like, oh, it's all about Gucci now. It could all it could be one of those things that just doesn't tip over, I think, in 5 seasons. I think, you know, there's so much hype around it now. It's got a bit out of control, really. And I'd like to see, like, to what extent what is arriving in the shops, what people end up buying, whether things are kind of like as well made, you know, all those sort of stress tests that I think will kind of come to pass in the next year.
Taking this scene and this hype to market.
I think, you know, so far it's doing fine, but it hasn't really, you know, it's only had about a month's worth of sales to look at. So it will be really interesting to look at it.
But isn't that exciting that we're like excited for that? Do you know what I mean?
It's like a 12% increase before anyone even, you know, before a single piece of clothing had arrived.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
And now they're redesigning the shops, and the shops look fun, and you know, it's all kind of, it all seems good. But I think you've got to be careful about just going, actually, it's all about this, and all that is like, you know, old news.
And things can, you know, fall out really, you know, fashion, short shelf life with designers and changes. It's always interesting to see.
Well, we're becoming more and more fickle, so it might just be that next week's about something else.
We're becoming more fickle.
Well, it will be about Demnar at Balenciaga next, won't it? And we'll all be like crazy about that, and it will be, you know, it will, and that will change everything again.
I think they'll start exploring other things like sports, where I think there's sports are in these collections now, and it's quite subtle and it's got embroidery on. But I think that's the next thing for them. It's like the old 90s Hilfiger and things, but that'll seep into the collections definitely, and that will sell. And that's what the original hardcore customer probably would buy.
Yeah, that's really smart. It was quite a nice note to end on, excitement for the future and intrigue at what could happen next. Shall we give all of Milan's designers a little round of applause for giving us lots of stuff to think about?